A balanced and varied diet is essential for staying healthy. This needs to comprise carbohydrates, fats, proteins, especially vitamin C and vitamin D, minerals. You need to have these in a balanced and a varied way because they all do different things. You need carbohydrates to provide you with energy, and you need fats to provide you with energy as well. Proteins is going to be used for growing and for repair of cells, so everyday repair of cells and replacement of cells and things that you lose along the way. Vitamins and minerals are going to be needed to keep you healthy generally, so you need quite a wide range of these. And like I mentioned before, you get things like vitamin C from fruits, so strawberries, oranges, and you get vitamin D from dairy products, so like eggs or milk. And these are just important for keeping your skin, your blood, your bones, and everything really, really healthy. You need to do exercise as well as having a balanced diet. And the more you exercise, the more you're going to burn as energy, so the more you are likely to eat. Doing various different forms of exercise is really important for keeping you healthy. If you don't eat a balanced diet, if you eat too little or too much, if you have an unbalanced diet, this can lead to a variety of different problems. So if you eat too little, you can become malnourished. And if you don't have enough vitamins or minerals in your body, this can lead to a number of different diseases. For example, if you don't have vitamin C, it can cause scurvy. Now, scurvy is relatively uncommon these days. It used to happen a lot when sailors went on boats and they didn't have access to fresh food, but we do have a lot of fresh food. And this can cause a problem with your skin, your joints, and your gums. If you don't have enough iron, which is a mineral in your diet, that can cause anemia, which can make you very, very tired or weak. Now, if you eat too much, you can become obese. And this can lead to type 2 diabetes. Now, this is a big, big problem in the UK and in other countries as well. Because your blood sugar levels go out of control, and this can lead to high blood pressure and heart disease. So it's really important that you have a balanced diet. Diseases are caused by pathogens. The main two types of pathogens are bacteria and viruses. Now, bacteria are very, very small cells. They are about 1/100th of the size of the cells that are in your body, and they reproduce very, very rapidly. They do two things. They produce toxins, which are basically poisons, which are going to make you feel very, very sick, or they damage your cells. Viruses are even smaller. They're not cells, they're just tiny, tiny little invaders that get their way into your cells, reproduce, and then burst out of a cell. Now, they destroy the cells that they burst out of, and this is going to be the cell damage that is going to make you feel really poorly when you get a virus. Now, your body can defend against pathogens in a number of different ways. The first one, the most obvious one, which is why people forget it so often, is the skin. Your skin is a barrier which stops a lot of nasty, horrible things getting into your body. Now, if you cut yourself, bacteria, viruses, nasty pathogens can get into your bloodstream, which is why it's really, really important that your blood clots to heal over that scab, and that you keep any wounds clean. Another one, slightly more one that people don't think of very often, is mucus. So all that snot in your nose, it's actually doing something useful. It's trapping the pathogens, it's being sticky and gooey, and making sure that any bacteria that you breathe in don't actually get very far. So what it does is it keeps it all in there. And then if pathogen does manage to get inside your body, we have the immune system. and that is going to be responsible for the defences inside your body, and what we have in there are white blood cells, and these are really, really important for making sure you stay healthy. There are 3 different ways that white blood cells work. They come along, here is our white blood cell, and they engulf the little pathogen, the bacteria or the virus, and they basically eat it. They consume it until there's nothing left. They get rid of it. 2, they produce antitoxins. Now, bacteria are going to release toxins, which are going to make you feel sick. The white blood cells produce antitoxins, which prevent you from feeling poorly. And they produce antibodies. Now, this only works with familiar things. If there's a new virus entering your body, your white blood cells will work to make antibodies as quickly as possible. But if you've been vaccinated against something, for example, the winter flu jab, and then your body will say, yep, I know what this is, I know how to deal with it, and your body will start responding a lot quicker. That's when the white blood cells produce antibodies. And they do look a little bit like Y shapes. They just float around in your bloodstream. You've got loads of different viruses and bacteria, and they just pop on the surface, and they kind of like send out a little signal going beep, 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 beep. Look, this is what it is. It's over here. You need to come and destroy it. Vaccinations are a fantastic way of preventing people getting ill. So I'm going to use the example of the MMR vaccination here. That protects against measles, mumps and rubella. At various different points through childhood, children get injected with a very, very small amount of dead or inactive virus. This means the virus won't make you ill, but what it will allow is your white blood cells to produce antibodies. Which means if you do come across the measles, mumps or rubella, that your body will recognise any of these viruses and will be able to protect you against them. Now, vaccination is really, really important. We're very, very lucky in the UK. We have a very, very wide vaccination programme, but it's not true in countries all over the world. For example, polio is a disease that's nearly been eradicated. In this country, we haven't had a case for years, but in other countries that are less economically developed, that maybe have problems with infrastructure, so they don't have a way to refrigerate the vaccines, or they're currently there's a war going on in that country, so healthcare workers can't get proper access to children. Children are still dying of polio these days, and it is something that we can prevent. It's very, very cheap to prevent. It's very, very easy to prevent. And in this country, and the majority of the Europe and the developed world, we haven't had a case of polio for years, because polio has horrendous debilitating effects on people. So do measles, mumps and rubella. If you get them later in life, they can be fatal. They can lead to very, very long, prolonged stays in hospital. They can lead to infertility and lots of other diseases that are going to affect you later in life. So vaccinations are really important and are a fantastic, cheap, easy way to prevent people getting ill and dying. There are some side effects to vaccinations. Very, very rarely, they don't always work. So the polio vaccine is very, very good, but the flu vaccination isn't great. It works the majority of times, but it won't always work. And sometimes you can have a bad reaction to a vaccination. Sometimes you might get a bit of a headache, or your arm might get a bit red, or in very serious cases, you might get a fever or start seizing. But bad reactions are very, very rare. Drugs come in a large variety of formats. The main types are going to be painkillers and antibiotics. Now, antibiotic resistance occurs very, very frequently, and it occurs very, very quickly. All it takes is one tiny little random mutation in one bacteria in one part of the world. And this bacteria isn't killed by the antibiotic. And this bacteria, because it survives the antibiotic, can then pass on its resistance, and it will very, very quickly spread all over the world. So antibiotic resistance is quite a big problem for our time. It's something we need to pay quite a lot of attention to, really, because we need to do as much as we can to stop antibiotic resistance. Otherwise, we're going to go back to a situation where people are dying from routine operations all the time, which would be very, very bad. You need to know how bacteria or microorganisms can be grown on an agar plate. So here is our petri dish, which has the agar jelly in it. Here is a Bunsen burner, because we need everything to be sterile, and here is our inoculating loop. Now what you can do is pick up some bacteria. So first of all, we need to sterilise our loop in our Bunsen burner flame. This is to clean it. Then we can go and pick up some bacteria on our inoculating loop and spread it onto our agar dish. And the things that are really important with this is that you don't open the lid up too much, because you don't want bacteria from the air to be getting in there. You want to close the lid as quickly as possible and seal it again, so no bacteria from the air gets in there. And in a school, you want to store it at about 25 degrees. That's going to stop anything truly, truly nasty growing in there. In a lab, they'll probably store it at about 37 degrees. Maybe a bit higher depending on what they're trying to grow, but in school it's 20-25 degrees. Now if you're looking for antibiotic resistance, you can get your plate of bacteria here, and you can put some paper discs soaked in different antibiotics on them. And if the bacteria grow all the way up to the plate, you know that that's bacteria isn't being killed by the antibiotic. Whereas if you've got a zone around the outside where no bacteria can grow, that means that the antibiotic on that particular disc is killing that bacteria. So that antibiotic is effective against that bacteria. Our nervous system allows you to respond to changes in the environment. It allows you to coordinate actions so you can respond to these changes, and to be able to respond to a change, you need to be able to interpret a change. So a stimulus is going to be picked up by receptors, and receptors are all over your body, quite a lot on your face. So we have eyes, which are going to go to the light receptors. We have ears, which are going to be sound receptors. Nose, which is going to be a sense receptor. We have the tongue, which is a taste receptor, and then we have the skin, which is going to be a touch receptor. And all of these receptors will send a signal as part of the nervous system to a receptor cell and cause a response. The signals that are picked up get sent very, very quickly to the central nervous system. The central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. This is where reflexes are going to happen. This is where actions are going to be coordinated. Instructions from the central nervous system are going to be sent back along neurons to effectors, which are going to be things like muscles or glands, and are going to cause movements to happen, or cause you to have a reflex, or cause your glands to secrete a hormone. There are 3 different types of neurons involved in this. Your sensory neurons that are going to carry the initial signal to the central nervous system, the relay neurons that are going to carry it around from the sensory neurons to the motor neurons, and the motor neurons which are going to carry the signal from the nervous system back to the effectors. When electrical signals are being carried along neurons, they are very, very quick. But when they are carried in between neurons across a synapse, it's relatively slow. So the signal comes along the neuron, gets to the end of the neuron, and triggers the release of this chemical across the synapse. And then this just has to diffuse across the synapse, get picked up by the little receptors on the other side, which can then start the electrical signal again. But this takes time. So the further it has to travel, the more synapses it takes, the longer it's going to take. Which is why not all signals go via the central nervous system. Your reflexes are very, very fast, very, very automatic responses. It's when you do things without thinking about it. So it's going to be moving your hands away from hot things, blinking when a light gets shone in your eye. Homeostasis is the maintenance of a constant internal environment. There are 4 ways this needs to be controlled: body temperature, the levels of water in your body, the iron content in your body, and your blood glucose levels. Your body temperature needs to be kept very, very close to 37 degrees. This is the temperature that all enzymes in your body work best at. But if the enzymes in your body get too hot or you're too cold, they won't work very well and you'll start to be quite ill. If you eat something that has too many ions in it, so if something is too salty, then your body will remove some of those ions. So you can lose it in sweat, or it can be removed by the kidneys, and then you can lose it via your urine. If you have too little water in your body, you'll start to be really, really thirsty. But if you have too much water in your body will lose it through 3 different ways. Through sweat, via the kidneys, which are going to excrete it as urine, or you're going to breathe it out in your breath. A hormone is a chemical messenger which will travel around your body via the bloodstream, causing an effect. Hormones are going to be very slow to respond. They're going to stay around in your bloodstream for a very long time, and it's going to be a general response because your blood goes everywhere throughout your body, so one hormone could have more than one effect. Whereas nerves are very, very fast. It could be seconds, the response from a nerve. It's going to be very, very quick. It's going to stay around for a short period of time and then it's going to be gone, and it's going to be very, very specific. It's only going to target one effector, one set of muscles or something like that. The menstrual cycle. Now, there are various different things you need to know about the menstrual cycle. We are going to start with the 4 different stages of the menstrual cycle, looking at the lining of the uterus. So on day 1, this is going to be when a period starts. We are going to have the breakdown of the lining of the uterus. Day 4, roughly how long a period lasts. So after that, the lining of the uterus is going to start to build up again until we get to about day 14, and at day 14 we get our egg released. So the lining of the uterus is going to be maintained through the majority of the cycle. If a pregnancy isn't established, then at day 28, day 1, which would happen next, the lining will break down again, and again that will last for about 4 days. Now, if a pregnancy is established in between day 14 and day 28, then the lining of the uterus will be maintained and there will be no period that happens. Follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH, is produced by the pituitary gland, which is in your brain, and causes an egg to mature in one of the ovaries. Now, this is going to be high for the majority of the period until the egg is released, and then it's going to go down because it's not needed for the second part of the menstrual cycle. Estrogen is produced in the ovaries, and it causes the pituitary gland to produce a second hormone or another hormone, luteinizing hormone, and inhibits further release of FSH. Now, it is low at the beginning but builds up until we get to day 14, which is when it needs to be its highest, so it's triggered the luteinizing hormone, and then it falls again and remains relatively steady for the rest of the period. Luteinizing hormone, or L8, is produced in the pituitary gland. It acts for a very short period of time, so it's very, very low. Acts for a very short period of time, then goes back to being low, and it triggers the release of the egg from the ovary. Hormones can be used to control fertility. You can take contraceptives, which are going to be hormone-based. Some of them are going to be progesterone only, some of them are going to be combined estrogen and progesterone, and they're going to reduce the risks of getting pregnant. Not stop getting pregnant, because there is still a chance you can get pregnant while you're on the pill, so it's always have to use a condom as well, but they can reduce the risks of you getting pregnant. Now, this is good because it reduces the risks of you getting pregnant and can reduce some of the risks of certain type of cancer, but there are some side effects as well: headaches, nausea, bloating, irregular bleeding. It does not protect against sexually transmitted diseases. So if you are having sex, you have to be using a condom as well. And as I mentioned, it doesn't prevent all pregnancies. Now, hormones can be used to improve the chances of getting pregnant as well. Lots of you know that I just finish an IVF cycle. You can go and watch my video on that, but very, very briefly, you have to take a shed load of drugs, luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. Lots and lots and lots of eggs are produced. These are taken out of the body. They are fertilized in a dish using sperm, either from the person's partner or from a sperm donor. These can then grow into an embryo and be implanted back either into the woman or into someone who's acting as a surrogate for the woman. Now, this picture here is actually of ICSI. Here you have the egg, and here is a needle where the sperm is being injected into it. This bit here is just holding it still. The problems with the good thing about IVF is that it gives you a baby when you can't have a baby otherwise. The problems with IVF is that the drugs have a large number of side effects, which are truly horrific. Again, I go on in lots more detail. You can see the very large number of drugs that I had to take to go and watch my IVF video. You can get multiple pregnancies, so twins, triplets, and it doesn't always work, but it's horrendously expensive. It costs roughly about £7,000 to £10,000 per cycle, and there's only about a 40% chance of it working. Plants will grow towards three things: light, which is phototrophism, gravity, which is geotrophism or gravitrophism, and they will grow towards water. Now, the way this happens is you get your shoot, and at the top there is this little hormone called auxin produced. And auxin will cause things to bend towards the light by causing this part where the hormone's grown to grow towards it. So it can grow towards light, gravity, or water. There are a large number of different types of drugs that you need to know about. Medicinal drugs, so useful things like painkillers or antibiotics. Recreational drugs, so legal and illegal ones. And performance enhancing drugs, which some people use to improve their performance in different sports. And when we're talking about performance enhancing drugs, these can be steroids, which are going to increase the muscle mass, so the athlete is going to be stronger, so he can run faster or lift more things, or stimulants, which is going to increase heart rate, so glucose and oxygen can be transported around the body faster than they are at the moment. There are also other drugs that increase the number of blood cells or increase the way that certain things in the body works. Now, you need to know the pros and cons. So if we're against this, it's going to be unfair on people not taking drugs. There could be serious health risks of taking things like steroids for a long time, and it's unfair if only certain athletes can afford to buy these drugs, whereas athletes from poorer countries can't afford to buy these drugs. If we're arguing for performance enhancing drugs, we can say that athletes have the right to make their own decisions about what they do with their life. That drug-free sports isn't really fair, because there's no level playing field in sports anyway. That athletes have different access to different facilities. So there's no level playing field at the start. So why shouldn't we just use drugs to make the playing field even more uneven? And those are the ones you need to know. That could come up as a really nice 6-mark question. Recreational drugs can be illegal or legal ones. So illegal ones, we're talking cannabis or ecstasy. Now, the problem with these is that you're generally buying them from somebody that you don't know, don't necessarily trust. You have absolutely no idea what is in them. So while they say it might be one thing, you could be paying for and taking absolutely anything. So not only is the heroin or cannabis going to have a devastating effect on your body, all the other rubbish that it is mixed with could also have a horrible, devastating effect on your body. Legal drugs are going to be things like nicotine and alcohol, which, while they're legal, does not mean they are safe. Loads and loads of people die each year from nicotine use and alcohol use. So just because they're legal doesn't mean they're safe. Any medicinal drug that makes it onto the market has to be tested. There is a very, very rigorous round of testing that they need to go through, starting with cells and tissues in the lab to see how these are affected. We can then move on to testing on animals to see how it works, to see what the toxicity is, to see what the dosage is. And then once it passes that, we can move on to doing clinical trials where it's tested on human volunteers. Now, there are lots of controversy involved in every single stage of this. I'm just going to talk about clinical trials. So if we're talking clinical trials, we have to have a double-blind clinical trial. So the person giving the drug and the person taking the drug doesn't know whether they're taking an active form of the drug or whether they're taking the placebo. A placebo is going to be like a sugar tablet just to see whether the act of taking the drug just makes you feel better anyway, whether the drug actually does anything, or whether just taking medicine will make you feel better. Now, the problem with clinical trials is that you are taking an unknown drug. You've got no idea what it's going to do. And there's a story in the news a few years ago where, unfortunately, a large number of people died or became very, very ill when taking a drug. So just because you are taking a drug in a clinical trial doesn't mean it's not going to kill you. People are generally paid for participating in clinical trials. So it's, not necessarily always representative of society, but they do try to match up sexes, ages and health lifestyles of people. Now, drug testing is really, really important. There was a case in the 1950s of thalidomide where people pregnant women took thalidomide when it hadn't been properly tested for use in pregnancy. And as a result of that, about 10,000 babies were born with abnormal limb development, and only half of them actually survived. So what can be seemingly a safe drug to take if you're a man, if you're never going to get pregnant, can actually have some devastating consequences in situations you hadn't thought about. Camels are one example of an animal that is really well adapted to their environment. So they have humps, which are made of fat, but they are used to store water, but they are not full of water, they're full of fat. They have long eyelashes. That is for keeping the sand out of their eyes. They have wide toes. So that is that, so they don't sink into the ground. They are really, really well adapted, and they are a nice sandy brown colour, so they match in with the sand. Cacti are an example of plants that are well adapted to a desert environment. So they have spines instead of leaves. This is to reduce surface area and to prevent them being eaten. They have thick stems. This is for water storage, and they have a shallow but wide set of roots so that they can absorb water as soon as it hits the surface over a very, very wide area. Polar bears are an example of an animal that is well adapted to an Arctic environment. So they have small ears, which means their surface area is actually very, very small compared to the volume. So it means they're going to reduce heat loss. They are well insulated, which I'm afraid is just a rather nice way of saying they're quite fat. They have a very, very thick layer of blubber or fat all around them, which keeps them warm, and they can use it as an energy source when they struggle to find fur. They have thick coats. That is going to trap the air in and keep them warm, and they have white coats. They have black skin, but they have white coats, and this helps them to be camouflaged in the snow, which means they can avoid predators. A population that is living in the wild can be affected by a range of different things. This could be a new disease that's been introduced, wiping out a large number of the population. It could be a new predator that's been introduced, or a predator that is thriving for some reason in this year. It could be due to an oversupply or undersupply of food. It could be due to competitors. Say if a new species is introduced that eats the same food, then that could affect it. Could be due to the temperature, so if it has a nice thick woolly coat and it gets really, really hot, well, it's not going to do very well. Or it could get very cold. It could rain too much or too little, or there could be too much water or air pollution for a population to survive. Our world is a very, very delicate thing where everything lives in balance, and if things tip out of balance, even slightly, even by 1 degree, it's going to have a massive, massive effect on the animals and plants that live here. When we talk about pyramids in biology, we are talking about either pyramids of biomass or pyramids of numbers. And these are stepped pyramids, not triangular pyramids like you might be used to. And each level, there's another level in there, each level is going to represent an animal or an organism in a food chain. So right down at the bottom here, we could have, say, 100 weeds. These weeds get fed upon by 9 rabbits. Those rabbits get fed upon by 1 fox. And then for this one, the rest of the pyramid doesn't exist. Now, pyramids don't always look like pyramids. For example, in this, the weeds, rabbit, fox that I've drawn here, we could have something else feeding on the fox. Now, this could be a large thing feeding on the fox, or it could be a small thing feeding on the fox. If it was a small thing feeding on the fox, if we're doing a pyramid of numbers, and say this was 1,000 fleas, it wouldn't look very pyramid shaped because the bit at the top would be very, very large. Sometimes they look like pyramids, sometimes they don't look like pyramids. You just have to use your common sense in an exam. Now, sometimes they might have little blocks drawn on, and you might have to count up how many blocks it takes up so that you can work out how many things go in that level. So for the carbon cycle, I'm referring a lot to organic compounds. And if you haven't heard this phrase before, it can be a bit confusing. Organic compounds are just any compound that has carbon in it. And just to remind you, a compound is 2 or more elements that are chemically bonded together. So here are all the different locations that carbon can be. It can be carbon dioxide in the air, or carbon dioxide can be dissolved in oceans. It can be as organic compounds in plants or in animals. These organic compounds can also be present in the dead plants and animals, and they are in fossil fuels. Now you need to know the various different ways that they change from all these different locations and what the processes are called. So let's start with fossil fuels. When we have fossil fuels, we can burn them so that the carbon in them goes into the air, and the fancy name for this is combustion. When the carbon dioxide is in the air, it can be taken up by plants, and this is a process of photosynthesis. And the opposite can occur as well, because plants will also undergo respiration. Plants get eaten by animals. And then plants and animals both die. From the organic compounds that are in the dead plants and animals, they can turn into fossil fuels by either being buried or being sedimented, or they can just go straight back up into the air by the process of decay. And then lastly, our animals are also undergoing respiration. So carbon isn't a static thing. It is constantly moving around from carbon dioxide in the air to carbon compounds that are in animals, plants, in dead animals, and then being inserted into fossil fuels, which can then be burnt and put the carbon dioxide back in the air. This is a very, very complicated, involved process that happens over millions of years, and you need to know all of these steps. Variation in population occurs for two reasons. We can have genetic variation and we can have environmental variation. Now, even if we have identical twins, they are not going to be identical. This is all due to environmental variation. They can have slight differences in how they look, how they behave, they can have different hair, they can have different weights, they can be different heights. Even if you have the same set of parents, if you have a big litter of tiny kittens, they are going to show genetic variation and environmental variation. Genetic variation is going to be things like fur colour, hair colour, eye colour. It's going to be down to heights. It's going to be down to whether you have freckles or whether you don't have freckles, things like that. Environmental variation is going to depend on a lot of factors. So not only how you were raised, but the environment that you were raised in. For example, the availability of food when you were growing up, your school life, and your health. So whether you were exposed to certain diseases or whether you had any immunisations. In a cell, there is going to be a nucleus, which is going to contain your chromosomes, which has strands of DNA, and that DNA, you can see, is the bit that contains your genes. Now, genes are made up of letters, as you can see here, A, T, C, and G, and it's those genes that code for all your characteristics. Different versions of the same genes are called alleles. So you can have an allele for blue eyes, you can have an allele for brown eyes, you can have an allele for brown hair, you can have an allele for red hair. And then what you actually look like, your phenotype, is going to depend on your genotype, what your genes are actually like. In sexual reproduction, we have gametes. These are the sperm and the egg. So here are our little sperm, here's our egg. This picture is not to scale, by the way. So here's our sperm and egg, and they fuse together to make the fertilized egg. Then that is going to divide by mitosis, which means you're going to get two cells which are going to be identical. Asexual reproduction is where a plant or an animal produces an identical version of itself. So you can see this happening really commonly in strawberries when they send out runners and new plants are produced. We are going to get identical daughters, and this again happens by mitosis. Now, there are a few problems with asexual reproduction because there's only one parent. You're going to end up with a lot of clones. And if this plant or this animal is susceptible to diseases and a disease strikes and your entire plant population are clones of each other, then the whole population is going to be wiped out. Farmers can deliberately engineer cloning. They can take cuttings of plants and grow them, or it happens quite a lot in cows. So if you have a prize cow and a prize bull, they can take the eggs out of one cow and fertilise a large number of eggs from the cow that they want. They can then make it wait until it gets to embryo stage. So when we have several cells all growing in a clump, and then they can split that up, and then each cell can go into a different mother. So this would be cow number 1, this would be cow number 2, and this would be cow number 3. And you can have potentially 8, 10 maybe identical eggs or identical embryos, that are being put back into 10 different surrogate mothers, and then you're going to have a large number of identical calves being born. Now, the advantage of this for the farmer is that it increases the chance of getting good offspring being born. So like if you're talking about good milk production or good meat production. But the disadvantages are you're reducing variation in your population. So if a disease strikes, that's likely that they're all going to be affected. There are a large number of new crop types, genetically modified or GM crops, that are being tested at the moment. The advantages for GM crops is that they could have an increased yield, so they could make more wheat or more apples per tree or whatever they're testing, which means there's going to be more food around, which in a time where people go to bed hungry and there are people starving, probably people on your street, definitely people in your town who go to bed hungry. Being able to make more food cheaply is a good thing. It also has lots of really positive implications for developing countries. They can engineer rice, which is a staple food in lots of countries, really easy to grow, so that it doesn't need as much water, so it becomes drought resistant, so that the communities are going to be less vulnerable to having a bad or a season where it doesn't rain very much. They can also engineer these crops to have certain nutrients or vitamins in them. So if it has a high level of vitamin A, for example, that means these people that are growing and eating these crops are going to be healthier because of the crops they're eating. They can also have herbicides in or insecticides in, so that they don't get eaten by insects or there's less competition from other plants. The downside to this is that some people don't think they're very safe and are scared of them, so they don't like them. Charles Darwin came up with the idea of evolution. This is the theory of natural selection. The theory goes that occasionally in when someone's or an animal's making babies, there's going to be a mutation. And this mutation could have no effect, it could have a good effect, or it could have a bad effect. And every so often there's going to be a mutation that's going to be good for the offspring. Now this could be changing the colour of a rabbit's fur, it could be increasing or decreasing the size of the ears, it could be making a giraffe's neck longer. But this random mutation that happens means that the offspring is more likely to survive because it is better suited to the environment. Whether it's better suited because it's better camouflaged, because it can survive temperatures better, or whether it has better access to food, there are lots of different reasons why, but it is going to be better suited to the environment. And these mutations occur completely randomly. There is another theory to evolution by Lamarck, and his theory was that acquired characteristics during a person or an animal's lifespan can be passed on to the offspring. For example, if you dye your hair blonde, that means you can then pass that characteristic on to your offspring. Obviously, we now know that that is rubbish because dyeing your hair blonde doesn't change the fact that you might have brown hair genes. Well done for making it to the end of the video. That was quite a long one there. Good luck for your exams. If there's anything I can do to help, just let me know.